You're no longer a fit for our new direction." After 15 years of forecasting with near-perfect accuracy, I was told I was obsolete. 6 months later, their warehouses were so full they couldn't open loading docks. And the VP who replaced me? He had no idea I still had every forecast, every warning on my home server. The fluorescent lights of Sterling Nexus Supply's executive floor hummed overhead as I sat across from Diane Fletcher, the head of HR. She'd been with the company nearly as long as I had, though we'd never really spoken beyond perfunctory greetings in the hallway. Today, her typically pleasant demeanor was replaced by a practiced neutrality that only comes from years of delivering bad news. "Gavin, I want to thank you for your 15 years of service to Sterling Nexus," she began, her voice measured and even. I knew what was coming before she continued. I'd seen the signs for weeks now. The closed-door meetings, the new executive hire from Chicago headquarters, the way certain people avoided eye contact in the hallway. "As you know, we're implementing some structural changes across departments," she continued. "Unfortunately, your position as demand forecasting director has been restructured." Restructured. The corporate euphemism for eliminated, erased, deleted. Behind Diane sat Brady Lorman, the new vice president of supply chain innovation, a title that hadn't existed at Sterling Nexus until 3 weeks ago. At 34, Brady was 16 years my junior, with slicked back hair and the kind of expensive suit that screamed ambition rather than achievement. He'd been parachuted in from Chicago, where our parent company's executive pool seemed to breed a certain type of corporate climber. "Gavin," Brady leaned forward, his voice carrying that particular blend of feigned empathy and excitement that made my stomach turn. "I want you to know that this isn't a reflection on your work. Your forecasting methods have served Sterling well for many years. Have served. Past tense already. But the future of demand forecasting is in AI-driven engines," he continued, unable to hide his enthusiasm even during my termination meeting. "We're implementing a state-of-the-art system that will transform how we predict customer needs. It's going to revolutionize our entire supply chain." I nodded slowly, not trusting myself to speak. 15 years. 15 years of forecasts that had kept this company's inventory balanced on a knife edge of efficiency. 15 years of navigating shortages, surpluses, market crashes, and consumer whims. I'd predicted the home goods surge during COVID 2 weeks before lockdowns began. I'd foreseen the container shipping crisis 6 months before it hit headlines. Not once, not a single time, had my quarterly forecasts missed by more than 3.8%. "Your severance package is quite generous," Diane said, sliding a folder across the glass table. 6 months' salary, continued health benefits through the end of the year, and we're not asking for any non-compete clauses. We value your contribution, Gavin. Value. Another present tense verb that felt like a lie. "The AI system," I finally said, my voice steadier than I expected. "Has it been tested against historical data, against seasonal variations, against supply chain disruptions?" Brady's smile flickered, just for a moment. "It's been benchmarked against industry standards. The algorithm is learning constantly." "Learning," I repeated. "So it doesn't know our business yet?" "It knows patterns, Gavin. It sees things human analysts can't possibly see." There was an edge to Brady's voice now. "This is the future. I'm sorry if that's difficult to accept." I could have argued. I could have pointed out that my outdated forecasting system had predicted exactly this shift toward AI solutions 3 years ago, and had already incorporated machine learning elements where they actually improved accuracy. I could have mentioned that I'd built redundancies into my models, specifically because AI tends to miss black swan events, the unexpected crises that reshape markets overnight. I could have shown him the 3 separate reports I'd prepared for the executive team over the past 2 years, explaining precisely why full AI replacement would be premature for our particular market segment. But what would be the point? The decision had clearly been made weeks ago, probably in some boardroom in Chicago, where nobody knew my name, let alone my track record. "I understand," I said instead, taking the folder. "When would you like me to clear out my office?" Brady looked relieved. Perhaps he'd expected protest or tears. "Take the rest of the week. It will need to transfer your access credentials today, of course, but you can pack your personal belongings at your convenience." I nodded again, stood up, and extended my hand first to Diane, then to Brady. His handshake was firm, too firm, the grasp of a man trying to prove something. "Good luck with the new system," I said, meaning it more than he could possibly understand. They would need luck. Lots of it. As I walked out of the conference room for the last time, I felt a strange detachment. 15 years of my life, reduced to a severance package and a cardboard box of desk plants and coffee mugs. What Brady didn't know, what none of them knew, was that every forecast, every model, every algorithm I'd ever created for Sterling Nexus Supply was meticulously backed up on my home server. Not company property, my intellectual methodology, built on my personal time, merely applied to company data. I hadn't stolen anything. I'd simply kept copies of my own work. It wasn't spite that made me maintain those backups. It was habit, professional pride, and a lesson learned long ago from my first mentor in the business. Numbers tell stories, Gavin. Never let someone else control your narrative. As the elevator doors closed on my career at Sterling Nexus, I wondered which story the numbers would tell in the months to come. My name is Gavin Price, and until that Tuesday morning, I had been the longest-serving director-level employee at Sterling Nexus Supply. At 50, I wasn't old by corporate standards, but I was apparently old enough to be considered a relic in the rapidly evolving world of supply chain management. Sterling Nexus Supply had been my professional home since I was 35, a wholesale distribution powerhouse specializing in home goods across the Pacific Northwest. From our headquarters in Seattle, we supplied everything from kitchen appliances to garden furniture to over 200 retailers across Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and Northern California. Not a Fortune 500 company by any means, but a solid regional player with annual revenues approaching $280 million. My journey to becoming demand forecasting director had been unconventional. I didn't have an MBA or even a business degree. My background was in applied mathematics and statistics, with early career stints in weather prediction models and insurance risk assessment. When Sterling hired me in 2010, it was for a middle management position analyzing sales patterns, a job that paid the bills while I nursed my wife Lena through her first bout of illness. Within 2 years, I developed a forecasting methodology that reduced inventory costs by 22%, while simultaneously decreasing stockouts by 17%. The executive team at the time, very different from today's Chicago imported leadership, had been impressed enough to create a new position for me. By 2012, I was heading a small team dedicated to predicting consumer demand across our entire product catalog. My office, former office now I supposed, had been on the 11th floor of our Seattle headquarters, with a view of Elliott Bay that still amazed me on clear days. The space was modest but functional, with 3 monitors that displayed real-time data streams from our warehouses, sales reports from retail partners, and my own proprietary dashboard that tracked dozens of variables affecting consumer purchasing patterns. The walls had been covered with framed graphs, what my late wife Lena used to jokingly call Gavin's crystal balls. Each frame showcased a particularly successful forecast: the unexpected run on emergency generators during the 2019 winter storms, the sudden demand spike for home office equipment in early 2020, the garden furniture boom of 2021. 15 years of predictions that had kept Sterling one step ahead of market trends. As I packed those frames into a cardboard box, each one felt heavier than it should. They weren't just professional achievements. They were milestones in a life that had otherwise been marked by personal loss. Forecasting had been my anchor when everything else seemed chaotic and unpredictable. When Lena was first diagnosed with the arterial condition that would eventually take her life, I'd thrown myself into my work, finding comfort in the ordered world of numbers and patterns. My husband, the logistics prophet, she'd called me during her better days, finding humor even as her health declined. When she died 7 years ago, forecasting became more than a job. It became my purpose, my identity. And now, apparently, it was nothing. I was halfway through packing when Melissa Tran, my senior analyst, appeared in the doorway. At 32, Melissa was brilliant, dedicated, and fiercely loyal. Qualities I hoped the new regime would recognize rather than penalize. "Is it true?" she asked, her normally composed face betraying shock and anger. "They're replacing you with that Chicago guy and some AI system." I nodded, carefully wrapping a glass paperweight Lena had given me for our last anniversary. "Afraid so. The future of forecasting, according to Mr. Lorman." "That's bull," Melissa said, stepping into the office and closing the door. "Your system already uses machine learning algorithms where appropriate. We've tested full AI replacement 3 times, and it always falls apart during anomaly scenarios." "I know. They don't." I sighed, gesturing for her to take a seat. "Look, Melissa, this isn't about forecasting accuracy. It's about corporate politics and shiny new toys. Brady needs to justify his position and his budget, and replacing the old guy with cutting-edge tech makes for a good quarterly presentation." "So you're just accepting this?" Disbelief colored her voice. 15 years, Gavin. 15 years of perfect forecasts. You've saved this company millions." I paused, considering how much to share with her. Melissa wasn't just a colleague. She'd become something of a protege over the past 5 years. She understood the nuances of our forecasting system better than anyone except me. "For now, yes. I'm accepting it," I said carefully. "But I'd advise you to keep detailed records of all forecasting decisions made under the new system. Compare them against our historical models. Document everything." She studied my face, her quick mind grasping the implications immediately. "You think it's going to fail?" "I know it's going to fail," I corrected her. "The question is how badly and how quickly. Brady's AI system might work beautifully for predictable, stable product categories, but Sterling's inventory includes seasonal items, emergency supplies, trend-sensitive home goods. The algorithm will miss crucial context unless it's been specifically trained on our market segment, which I doubt." Melissa leaned forward, lowering her voice. "What do you want me to do?" "Your job," I said simply. "Be professional. Be helpful. Try to make the transition work if you can. But keep your eyes open." She nodded slowly. "And what will you do?" I closed the last box and taped it shut. "Take some time off. Travel a bit, maybe. I haven't had a proper vacation in years." I managed a small smile. "Maybe I'll finally fix that deck Lena always wanted." Melissa didn't look convinced, but she respected my privacy enough not to push further. She stood and gave me an unexpected hug. "They'll regret this," she said with certainty. "Maybe," I replied, "but that's not for me to forecast anymore." As she left, I took one last look around the office that had been my professional home for a decade and a half. Everything of true value, my models, my methodologies, my understanding of Sterling's business patterns, was already safely backed up at home. The physical trappings were just that. Trappings. I picked up my boxes and walked out without looking back. The weeks following my restructuring passed in a strange haze of freedom and disorientation. After 15 years of 60-hour work weeks, of constant data analysis and quarterly presentations, of being the person everyone turned to when supply chains faltered, I suddenly had nothing. No urgent emails demanding responses, no late-night calls from warehouse managers, no executive meetings where I translated complex forecasting models into simple action items for people who called spreadsheets those number things. I did what newly unemployed executives are supposed to do. I updated my LinkedIn profile, though half-heartedly. I contacted a few industry colleagues to let them know I was exploring new opportunities. I even had coffee with a headhunter who promised exciting positions at companies that all seemed like smaller, less interesting versions of Sterling. But my heart wasn't in the job search. 6 months of severance gave me time to reflect, and reflection was something I hadn't allowed myself in years. Besides, a part of me, the part that had built Sterling's forecasting systems from scratch, was morbidly curious about what would happen next. I found myself spending hours in my home office, where 3 servers hummed quietly in a specially ventilated closet. These machines contained every forecast I'd ever made for Sterling, every algorithm I'd developed, every data pattern I'd identified. Not the company data itself, I was too ethical for that, but my methodologies, my insights, my intellectual property. On one particularly sleepless night, around 3 a.m., I found myself running simulations based on Sterling's likely purchasing patterns under Brady's leadership. Using publicly available information about their product lines and the seasonal trends I knew by heart, I forecasted where they would be in 6 months. The results weren't pretty. If Brady's AI system worked the way most off-the-shelf solutions did, it would overemphasize recent sales data while undervaluing long-term seasonal patterns and macroeconomic indicators. It would struggle with products that had limited historical data. Most dangerously, it would likely recommend inventory increases across multiple categories simultaneously, creating a compounding effect that would overwhelm warehouse capacity by late summer. I ran the simulation 3 times, adjusting variables and assumptions. Each time, the outcome was the same. Sterling Nexus Supply was heading for a serious inventory crisis within 6 months. For a moment, I considered reaching out to Emily Ralston, Sterling's CEO. Emily and I had always had a cordial, respectful relationship. She'd trusted my forecasts during the pandemic, when every other indicator was chaotic. But she had also approved Brady's hiring and my termination. She had chosen the AI-driven future Brady promised over the proven system I'd built. No, I decided, closing my laptop as dawn broke. This wasn't my problem anymore. Sometimes people and companies needed to learn lessons the hard way. Instead of dwelling on Sterling's future problems, I finally turned my attention to that deck Lena had always wanted. Our modest home in North Seattle had a sloping backyard that offered glimpses of the Puget Sound on clear days. Lena had envisioned a tiered deck where she could tend container gardens, and we could watch the sunset together. We'd never built it. There was always another work crisis, another forecast deadline, another quarter where Sterling needed me more than my home improvement projects did. By the time I had accumulated enough vacation days to tackle it, Lena was too sick for it to matter. Now, with nothing but time, I threw myself into the project. I researched designs, bought power tools I barely knew how to use, and spent days measuring, cutting, and building. It was physical, concrete work, the opposite of the abstract data analysis that had consumed my professional life. My hands blistered, then calloused. My shoulders ached from carrying lumber. I made rookie mistakes that required starting sections over. But slowly, steadily, the deck took shape. Each evening, I would sit on the incomplete structure with a beer, watching the sunset where Lena had imagined she would someday sit. You'd laugh at how bad I am at this, I told her, absent presence one evening, 4 months after leaving Sterling. The forecasting genius who can't cut a straight line with a circular saw. The deck was nearly finished now, though far from perfect. Like my forecasting models, it had been revised and improved through iterations, each mistake teaching me something new. Unlike my models, its flaws were visible to the naked eye. Uneven boards, slightly misaligned railings, a step that wasn't quite level. Lena would have loved it anyway. Perfection is overrated, she used to say, especially in her final years when each day was a gift rather than a guarantee. Imperfect things have character. As I sat contemplating both my handiwork and my late wife's wisdom, my phone rang. The screen displayed a name I hadn't seen in months. Emily Ralston, CEO, Sterling Nexus Supply. I considered letting it go to voicemail. Whatever crisis Sterling was facing, it wasn't my responsibility anymore. But curiosity, or perhaps habit, made me answer. Emily, I said, keeping my tone neutral. This is unexpected. Gavin. Her voice was tight, controlled, but I could hear tension beneath the professional veneer. I hope you're doing well. I am. Building a deck, if you can believe it. That's good. She cleared her throat. Gavin, I'm calling because we're facing a situation at Sterling. A situation where your expertise would be valuable. I took a slow sip of my beer, saying nothing. After 15 years in corporate environments, I'd learned that silence often revealed more than questions. Our inventory levels are... She paused, searching for a diplomatic term. Challenging. Challenging, I repeated. We currently have approximately $3.6 million in excess inventory across all warehouses, she said, the words coming faster now. Primary categories affected are outdoor furniture, camping equipment, and water filtration systems. We're running out of storage space. Some loading docks can't even function because of overflow. I closed my eyes, recalling my late-night simulation from months ago. The prediction had been accurate, though the dollar amount was even higher than I'd projected. That sounds difficult, I said carefully. Gavin. Emily's professional tone cracked slightly. We both know this isn't just a routine fluctuation. Something is fundamentally wrong with our forecasting system. The AI-driven demand engine, I said, unable to keep a touch of irony from my voice. Is it not learning as expected? There was a long pause. Brady says it needs more time to adjust to seasonal patterns, that its machine learning capabilities will eventually correct course. Eventually, I echoed. And in the meantime? In the meantime, we have retailers canceling orders because we can't deliver essential products. We have warehouses so full that staff can barely move between aisles. We have millions tied up in inventory that isn't moving. She took an audible breath. And we have Q3 financials due to the board in 3 weeks. I said nothing, watching the last rays of sunlight disappear behind the Olympic Mountains. This moment should have brought satisfaction, vindication that my methods had been right all along. Instead, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Concern for the company that had been my professional home for so long. Sympathy for Emily, who had always been fair to me personally. And yes, a small human part that thought, I told you so. What would you like from me, Emily? I asked finally. Consultation, she said immediately. We need your analysis of what went wrong and how to correct course. The board has authorized a generous consulting fee. I'd need access to the current inventory data, sales figures for the past 6 months, and the forecasting parameters Brady's system has been using. Of course, whatever you need. The relief in her voice was palpable. "How soon can you start?" I looked at my nearly finished deck, at the tools scattered across it, at the beer in my hand. 5 months ago, I'd been unceremoniously pushed out after 15 years of service. Now they needed me to fix the mess they'd created. "Send me the data tonight," I said. "I'll take a preliminary look. But Emily, I want to be clear. I'm not coming back permanently. This is a one-time consultation." "Understood," she said quickly. "And Gavin, thank you." After we hung up, I sat in the gathering darkness, contemplating the irony of the situation. For 15 years, I'd built systems to prevent exactly this kind of inventory crisis. I'd created forecasting models that balanced stock levels against warehouse capacity, that anticipated seasonal fluctuations, that prevented overbuying in multiple categories simultaneously. All that work, all that institutional knowledge, discarded for a shiny new AI solution that apparently couldn't distinguish between spring gardening trends and fall home goods patterns. I finished my beer and headed inside to my home office, powering up the servers that contained every forecast I'd ever made for Sterling. Somewhere in those files was the exact warning I'd written before leaving, the prediction that Sterling's new AI-driven system would fail to account for seasonal overlaps and create a compounding inventory crisis by late summer. It took me less than 20 minutes to find it. I'd prepared a detailed report for the executive team in my final month, outlining the specific risks of transitioning to a fully automated forecasting system without proper historical training. The report included precise predictions about which product categories would be most vulnerable to miscalculation and when the crisis would likely manifest. I checked the document properties. It had been delivered to Emily, to the CFO, and to Brady Lorman on my last Tuesday at Sterling. Whether any of them had actually read it was another question entirely. As promised, Emily sent over the current data that evening. Comprehensive files showing inventory levels, recent orders, warehouse capacity, and sales figures for the past 6 months. I also received, somewhat to my surprise, complete access to Brady's AI forecasting system and its parameters. I stayed up until 3 a.m. analyzing the information, comparing actual outcomes against both Brady's forecasts and my own models. The results were exactly as I'd predicted. The AI system had failed to account for several critical factors. It had interpreted the slight uptick in garden furniture sales this past spring as a trend rather than a seasonal pattern, leading to massive overordering. It had failed to correlate water filtration system demand with weather patterns and wildfire seasons, connections that were obvious to anyone who understood the Pacific Northwest market. Most damningly, it had recommended simultaneous inventory increases across multiple bulky item categories, creating a physical storage crisis that my system had always been designed to prevent. I prepared a detailed analysis, complete with charts comparing Brady's forecasts against actual sales and against what my system would have predicted. The evidence was damning. Not only had the AI system failed to match my historical accuracy, but it had actively created a crisis that would take months to resolve. By morning, I had a complete report ready to send to Emily, including recommendations for immediate inventory rebalancing and a phased approach to correcting the forecasting methodology. But as I hovered over the send button, a new message appeared in my inbox. It was from Melissa Tran, my former analyst, sent from her personal email rather than her Sterling address. "Gavin," it read, "I heard Emily reached out to you about the inventory situation. Before you respond, there's something you should know. Brady didn't just replace your system. He deliberately discredited it. I've attached some emails you should see. These weren't easy to get, but I thought you should have the full picture. Call me when you can." -M. I opened the attached files, forwarded email chains that Melissa had apparently saved before they were deleted from the company servers. What I read made my blood run cold. Brady had systematically undermined my forecasting methodology from the moment he arrived. He'd ordered the IT department to remove historical forecasting data from the main servers, claiming it was cluttering the system. He'd presented my past successes as lucky coincidences rather than the result of careful analysis. Most disturbingly, he'd actively dismissed warnings about seasonal inventory patterns as outdated thinking that would hold back innovation. One email to a Chicago executive was particularly revealing. Price's system is too human-dependent. Once we remove him and his antiquated methods, we can show significant cost savings and efficiency improvements within 6 months. The AI solution will pay for itself by Q3, guaranteed. Well, Q3 had arrived, and along with it, a $3.6 million inventory crisis that was threatening Sterling's entire operation. I closed the emails and picked up my phone. Melissa answered on the first ring. "Did you see them?" she asked without preamble. I did. "How bad is it really in the warehouses?" She sighed heavily. "Worse than Emily probably told you. Portland is at 143% capacity. They're storing furniture in the staff break rooms. Seattle has rental containers in the parking lot. And we've got retailers screaming because we can't deliver air conditioners during a heat wave, but we have enough camping chairs to outfit the entire Cascade Mountain range." Has Brady acknowledged the problem? Are you kidding? He's still insisting the AI is calibrating. Meanwhile, he's blaming warehouse management for inefficient storage practices and the sales team for not pushing the excess inventory hard enough. I rubbed my temples, feeling a familiar tension headache building. Who else knows about these emails? Just me. And Rico from the Portland warehouse. He's been documenting everything since May. He's got photos, inventory counts, even video of workers trying to navigate aisles that are down to 12 inches of clearance. Rico Alvarez had been Sterling's Portland warehouse manager for almost as long as I'd been with the company. A practical, no-nonsense operations expert who had always appreciated my forecasts precisely because they prevented the kind of chaos he was now dealing with. Has Emily seen any of this documentation? Not yet, Melissa said. Rico and I weren't sure who to trust, but when I heard Emily had reached out to you, I thought, maybe it's time to bring everything into the open. I considered the situation carefully. This wasn't just about me being right and Brady being wrong. This was about a deliberate attempt to erase 15 years of work, to dismiss proven methodologies in favor of unproven technology, and now to cover up the disastrous results. "Okay," I said finally. "Here's what we do. I'm going to send Emily my analysis of the current situation, along with my recommendations for immediate action. I won't mention the emails yet. Let's see how she responds first. And if she doesn't take it seriously? Then we go to the board with everything. My original warnings, the current crisis, Brady's emails, Rico's documentation. But let's give Emily a chance to do the right thing first." After hanging up with Melissa, I reviewed my report one more time, making sure every assertion was backed by data. Every recommendation was practical and specific. Then I sent it to Emily with a brief note, offering to discuss further at her convenience. Her response came within 15 minutes. "Gavin, we need to talk. Are you available for a meeting tomorrow? The entire executive team will be present." I replied that I was, and spent the rest of the day preparing for what promised to be a contentious discussion. Whatever happened next, Sterling Nexus Supply was about to face a reckoning, not just with its inventory crisis, but with the decisions that had created it. Sterling's headquarters looked exactly as I remembered it. The gleaming glass tower overlooking Elliott Bay, the sleek reception area with its polished concrete floors and minimalist furniture, the faint scent of coffee that permeated every floor. Yet walking through the security turnstile as a visitor rather than an employee created a strange sense of dislocation, as if I were experiencing a familiar dream from a new perspective. The receptionist, a new hire who didn't recognize me, gave me a visitor badge and directed me to the main boardroom on the 15th floor. As I rode the elevator up, I mentally rehearsed my presentation one final time. My goal wasn't to embarrass Brady or to gloat about being right. It was to provide Sterling with a clear path out of its current crisis and to ensure that similar mistakes wouldn't be repeated. The boardroom doors were open when I arrived. Inside, the executive team was already assembled around the massive oak table, Emily at the head, flanked by the CFO and COO. Brady sat midway down, his posture rigid, his expression unreadable. Melissa was there too, seated slightly apart with her laptop open, presumably to provide additional data if needed. And to my surprise, Rico Alvarez had flown in from Portland. His presence, the warehouse manager rarely attended executive meetings, suggested that Emily was taking the situation even more seriously than I'd anticipated. "Gavin," Emily rose to greet me, extending her hand. "Thank you for coming in on such short notice." "Of course," I replied, shaking her hand and nodding to the others around the table. Brady's acknowledgement was minimal, a slight tightening of his jaw and a cursory nod. "We've all reviewed your preliminary report," Emily continued, gesturing for me to take the vacant seat at the opposite end of the table. "To say it's concerning would be an understatement." "It's one interpretation of the data," Brady interjected, his voice carefully controlled. "But I think we need to consider the broader context before jumping to conclusions." Emily glanced at him sharply. "We'll get to your perspective, Brady, but first, I'd like Gavin to walk us through his analysis in detail." She turned back to me. "The floor is yours." I connected my laptop to the room's display system, and my first slide appeared on the wall-sized screen behind me. A simple comparison chart showing inventory levels over the past 6 months, with clear divergence points between predicted and actual figures. "What you're looking at," I began, "is the delta between forecasted inventory needs and actual warehouse capacity since January. The blue line represents optimal inventory levels based on my historical forecasting model. The red line shows actual inventory accumulation under the current system. The divergence was stark and dramatic, a steady increase in the red line that accelerated sharply around May, while the blue line maintained a consistent, manageable level with subtle seasonal fluctuations. By April," I continued, "the divergence was already concerning. By June, it became critical. Today, Sterling's warehouses are at an average of 132% capacity across all locations, with Portland reaching dangerous levels of overcrowding that potentially violate safety regulations." I clicked to the next slide, which broke down the excess inventory by category. Garden furniture, 214% over optimal levels. Camping equipment, 178% over optimal. Water filtration systems, 163% over optimal. These 3 categories alone account for $2.8 million of the $3.6 million excess. Brady shifted uncomfortably. "These are seasonal fluctuations that were entirely predictable," I finished for him, clicking to my next slide. "This is a report I prepared in my final month at Sterling, specifically warning about these exact categories and the risks of transitioning to an untrained AI system during the critical spring to summer inventory period." The document displayed on screen was dated, with key sections highlighted, sections that precisely predicted the current crisis, down to the specific product categories most at risk. "This report," I continued, "was distributed to the executive team, including you, Brady, on March 15th. It explicitly warned that an AI system without proper historical training on Sterling's unique seasonal patterns would likely misinterpret spring sales data and create a compounding inventory crisis by August." The room was silent. Emily was staring at the screen, her expression unreadable. The CFO was frantically flipping through papers, presumably looking for his copy of the report in question. Brady's face had flushed slightly, but his voice remained steady. That report was considered during the transition planning. However, our analysis indicated that the AI system's advanced learning capabilities would compensate for any initial calibration issues. Did it? I asked simply, clicking to my next slide. This one showed a comparison between my forecasting system's predictions for the current quarter and the actual outcomes. The correlation was nearly perfect, with only minor variances in a few subcategories. This is what Sterling's inventory would look like today if my outdated system had remained in place, I said quietly. No crisis. No overcrowded warehouses. No millions tied up in unsellable seasonal goods. Brady leaned forward. You can't possibly know that for certain. This is a theoretical projection based on 15 years of data and a forecasting methodology that has never missed a quarterly projection by more than 3.8%, I cut in. This isn't theoretical, Brady. This is what would have happened, because it's what has always happened under my system. Emily raised a hand, stopping Brady's next objection before it could start. Rico, she said, turning to the warehouse manager. You've been unusually quiet. What's the reality on the ground in Portland? Rico Alvarez was a stocky, practical man in his late 50s who had worked his way up from forklift operator to warehouse manager through sheer competence and hard work. He rarely spoke in executive meetings, preferring to let the numbers speak for themselves. Today, however, he had plenty to say. It's a disaster, he stated flatly. I've been with Sterling for 17 years, and I've never seen anything like it. We can't move product efficiently. We can't access older inventory because newer shipments are blocking the aisles. We've had 3 minor injuries from workers trying to navigate overcrowded spaces. He pulled out his tablet and tapped the screen a few times. I've documented everything since May, when it became clear this wasn't a temporary issue. The main display switched to Rico's tablet feed, showing a series of photos and videos from the Portland warehouse. The images were shocking. Aisles reduced to narrow pathways, products stacked in haphazard configurations, staff break areas converted to impromptu storage. This isn't just an efficiency problem, Rico continued. It's a safety issue. If we had a fire inspection tomorrow, we'd fail catastrophically. Not to mention the product damage we're seeing from improper storage conditions. Brady was visibly uncomfortable now. These are temporary logistical challenges that were entirely preventable, Rico interrupted, unusual assertiveness in his voice. For 15 years, Gavin's forecasts kept our warehouses running at optimal capacity. We never had to turn away deliveries. We never had to rent emergency storage containers. We never had to choose between violating safety protocols and rejecting new inventory. Emily's expression had darkened as she viewed the warehouse documentation. Why wasn't I informed about the severity of these conditions? Rico glanced briefly at Brady before answering. I sent detailed reports up the chain starting in early June. I was told the situation was being monitored and that the AI system needed time to self-correct. All eyes turned to Brady, who maintained his composure despite the mounting evidence against him. Yes, I received Rico's reports, he acknowledged, but the data suggested the inventory imbalance was temporary, a result of the system's learning curve combined with some unexpected market fluctuations. Unexpected by whom? I asked quietly. The market behaved exactly as it has for the past decade. The seasonal patterns were consistent with historical trends. The only variable that changed was the forecasting methodology. Emily had heard enough. Brady, did you receive and review Gavin's transition report warning specifically about these risks? Brady hesitated just long enough for the answer to be obvious. I reviewed all relevant documentation during the transition period. That's not what I asked, Emily pressed. Did you read the report that specifically warned about this exact scenario? I skimmed it, Brady admitted, but it seemed overly cautious, based on outdated methodologies that— Stop! Emily's voice was sharp. Just stop. The outdated methodology prevented exactly this kind of crisis for 15 years. The revolutionary AI system created a multi-million-dollar inventory disaster in less than 6 months. She turned to the CFO. David, what's the financial impact if we can't resolve this quickly? The CFO cleared his throat. Beyond the $3.6 million in tied-up inventory, we're looking at approximately $42,000 per week in additional storage costs for the rental containers. We've had over $180,000 in canceled orders due to delivery delays. And if we have to liquidate the seasonal excess at discount prices, we're projecting losses of at least $1.2 million. Emily's expression was grim. And all of this because we ignored specific warnings from our most experienced forecasting expert. She looked at me. Gavin, in your report, you outlined a recovery plan. Walk us through it. For the next hour, I detailed my recommendations for addressing the immediate crisis: a phased rebalancing of inventory across warehouses, targeted promotions to move excess seasonal goods, temporary expansion of the Seattle facility to relieve pressure on Portland, and most importantly, a systematic review of the forecasting system. The AI component isn't inherently flawed, I explained, trying to be fair despite everything. But it needs to be properly trained on Sterling's specific market patterns and integrated with human oversight. Technology is a tool, not a replacement for institutional knowledge. Emily nodded, taking notes. And the timeline for implementation? 6 weeks to resolve the immediate capacity issues, 3 months to rebalance inventory to optimal levels, 6 months to properly calibrate the forecasting system with the right balance of AI and human analysis. As I concluded my presentation, the room fell silent. The evidence was overwhelming, the path forward clear. Everyone was now looking to Emily for her decision. She didn't keep them waiting long. Brady, she said, her tone measured but firm. You'll have an opportunity to present your perspective to the board this afternoon. For now, I need you to work with IT to grant Gavin full access to all forecasting and inventory systems. Brady's expression tightened, but he nodded stiffly. Rico, Emily continued, return to Portland immediately and begin implementing the safety measures Gavin outlined. David, prepare a financial impact report for the board meeting. Melissa, coordinate with all department heads to communicate the new protocols. Finally, she turned to me. Gavin, I owe you an apology. Your warnings were ignored, your expertise dismissed, and Sterling is paying the price. I'm formally offering you the position of Chief Data and Forecasting Officer, reporting directly to me, with full autonomy over your department and methodology. The offer took me by surprise. I had expected a consulting arrangement, perhaps a temporary return to help manage the crisis, not a new executive position with expanded authority. I appreciate the offer, Emily, I said carefully, but I'd like some time to consider it. This isn't just about a title or reporting structure. It's about Sterling's commitment to balancing innovation with proven methodologies. Emily nodded. Of course. Take the weekend to think it over. In the meantime, we'll implement your recovery plan immediately, with your guidance as a consultant. As the meeting adjourned, Brady made a swift exit without making eye contact with anyone. The others filtered out more slowly, with Rico and Melissa both stopping to thank me quietly before leaving. Finally, only Emily and I remained in the boardroom. He deleted your historical data, she said without preamble. That's what I discovered this morning. Brady ordered all your forecasting records purged from the main servers in April. I wasn't surprised, given Melissa's emails, but the confirmation still stung. Fortunately, I kept backups of my work. Yes, fortunately. Emily sighed heavily. Gavin, beyond the job offer, I want you to know that what happened was inexcusable. I should have questioned the transition plan more thoroughly. I should have followed up on your warnings. You trusted your new VP, I said. That's what CEOs are supposed to do. Not blindly. Not at the expense of 15 years of proven success. She shook her head. The board will make the final decision about Brady this afternoon. But between us, his position at Sterling is untenable. I nodded, unsurprised. In corporate terms, a $3.6 million mistake wasn't just a learning opportunity. It was a career-ending error. Whatever you decide about the position, Emily continued, Sterling needs your expertise to navigate this crisis. Your institutional knowledge isn't just valuable, it's irreplaceable. As I left the building that afternoon, I felt an odd mixture of vindication and sadness. Vindication that my methods had been proven correct, that my warnings had been justified. Sadness that it had taken a preventable crisis to make that point. I drove home to my half-finished deck, to the quiet house that still echoed with Lena's absence, to the servers that had preserved what Brady had tried to erase. The job offer weighed on my mind. Did I want to return to Sterling? To the early mornings and late nights, the quarterly presentations, the constant pressure of keeping supply chains flowing smoothly? For 15 years, forecasting had been my anchor, when everything else seemed chaotic. Now, I had to forecast my own future, and for once, the variables weren't neatly quantifiable. The board's decision came swiftly and decisively. By Friday afternoon, Brady Lorman had been removed from his position at Sterling Nexus Supply. The official announcement cited strategic differences as the reason for his departure. But everyone within the company knew the truth. His AI revolution had failed catastrophically, and he had deliberately ignored warnings that could have prevented the crisis. Throughout the weekend, I weighed Emily's job offer carefully. The title, Chief Data and Forecasting Officer, would mean a seat on the executive team, reporting directly to the CEO, with expanded responsibilities and significantly higher compensation. The autonomy would ensure that my forecasting methodology wouldn't be casually dismissed again. But returning to Sterling meant returning to corporate politics, to long hours and high pressure, to an environment that had ultimately valued flashy innovation over proven reliability. On Sunday evening, as I sat on my now completed deck, watching the sunset over Puget Sound, I came to a decision. I would return to Sterling, but on my own terms. Monday morning, I called Emily. I'll accept the position, I told her, with 3 conditions. Name them, she replied without hesitation. First, my team needs to be expanded. Melissa Tran is promoted to Director of Forecasting Operations, reporting to me. Rico Alvarez gets additional staff in Portland and a formal role in inventory planning. Done, Emily said immediately. They've more than proven their value. Second, we establish a formal review process for any significant changes to forecasting methodology. No more unilateral decisions based on shiny new technology without rigorous testing against historical data. That makes perfect sense. And the third condition? I took a deep breath. The forecasting system will be rebuilt as a hybrid model. We'll integrate AI components where they add value, but we maintain human oversight of critical decision points. And we preserve historical data permanently, so institutional knowledge isn't lost with personnel changes. There was a brief pause on the line. That's entirely reasonable, Gavin. Is there anything else? Just one personal request. I'll need flexible hours for the first month while I finish some projects at home. A deck that's been 15 years in the making. Emily chuckled. Consider it done. When can you start? I'll come in tomorrow to begin the recovery implementation. My official return as CDFO can be next Monday. Perfect. I'll have HR prepare the paperwork. She paused. And Gavin, thank you. Not many people would come back after what happened. After we hung up, I walked out onto my imperfect but finished deck, the project that had occupied my time and thoughts during my unexpected sabbatical from Sterling. The craftsmanship was amateur at best, with uneven boards and slightly misaligned railings, but it was solid and functional. Like my forecasting models, it had been revised and improved through iterations, each mistake teaching me something new. In my home office, the servers still hummed, preserving the forecasting methodology that Brady had tried to erase. I ran my hand along one of the machines, feeling its steady vibration, a physical manifestation of data that had kept Sterling balanced on the knife edge of efficiency for 15 years. From a drawer, I pulled out an old USB drive, the first backup I'd ever made of my forecasting model, dated 2010. It was a primitive version of what would eventually become Sterling's supply chain backbone, but it contained the core insights that had guided my work ever since. I slipped the drive into my pocket, a tangible reminder of lessons learned. You can delete files, but you can't erase genuine understanding. The recovery process at Sterling would be challenging. Unwinding an inventory crisis of this magnitude would take months of careful rebalancing, strategic promotions, and systematic reorganization. The financial impact would linger through several quarterly reports. The relationship with certain retailers would need rebuilding after delivery failures. But Sterling would survive, and perhaps emerge stronger for having learned a painful lesson about balancing innovation with proven expertise, about respecting institutional knowledge while embracing new technologies. As for me, the forecasting director who became obsolete and then essential again in the span of 6 months, I had learned something too. My value wasn't in the specific algorithms or methodologies I'd developed. It was in the years of experience, the nuanced understanding of market patterns, the ability to see connections between seemingly unrelated data points. Those skills couldn't be restructured away or replaced by an AI system, no matter how sophisticated. They had been earned through 15 years of successes and failures, of adapting to changing markets and unexpected crises, of building models that balanced mathematical precision with practical reality. The next morning, as I prepared to return to Sterling not as a consultant, but as its soon-to-be chief data and forecasting officer, I took one last look at my completed deck. Lena would have loved it, not despite its imperfections, but because of them. Perfect things are boring, she used to say. Imperfect things have stories. Sterling's story was still being written, and now I would once again help shape its narrative, not as the forecasting director who had been pushed aside for a shinier solution, but as an executive who had proven his value in the most definitive way possible. As I drove toward the gleaming headquarters tower, the old USB drive still in my pocket, I found myself forecasting what lay ahead, not with algorithms or data models, but with the quiet confidence of someone who had seen a prediction fulfilled exactly as expected. The warehouses would empty gradually, the balance sheets would recover steadily, and the next time someone proposed replacing human expertise with artificial intelligence, there would be a cautionary tale ready at hand. The quarter when Sterling's warehouses overflowed, and the forecasting director they'd restructured away turned out to be irreplaceable after all. Because some things can't be reduced to algorithms or replaced by automation, no matter how advanced the technology. Some things, like 15 years of perfect forecasting, are built not by systems, but by people. People with experience, intuition, and the wisdom to know that sometimes the most valuable predictions come not from machines, but from those who have weathered enough storms to see the patterns in the clouds. My first day back at Sterling began not in my old office, but in the Portland warehouse. I wanted to see the crisis firsthand, to understand the physical reality of what the numbers on my spreadsheets represented. Rico Alvarez met me at the entrance, looking simultaneously exhausted and relieved. "Welcome back," he said, extending a calloused hand. "You've got your work cut out for you." That was an understatement. As Rico led me through the warehouse, the scale of the problem became viscerally clear. Aisles designed to accommodate forklifts were narrowed to barely walkable paths. Garden furniture was stacked in precarious towers. Camping equipment filled spaces meant for employee break areas. Water filtration systems occupied racks intended for small appliances, forcing those items into makeshift storage along walls. "How are the safety violations?" I asked, noting the blocked emergency exits and obstructed fire suppression systems. "We've managed temporary workarounds for the critical issues," Rico explained, "but we're still far outside compliance standards. Fire marshal's been understanding so far, but that won't last forever." I spent 3 hours with Rico, documenting every aspect of the overflow and developing a triage plan for immediate safety concerns. By lunchtime, we had a prioritized list of actions that would bring the warehouse back to minimum safety standards within 72 hours. "It won't be pretty," Rico warned as we finalized the plan. "We'll have to rent additional external storage at premium rates, and the extra handling will increase labor costs significantly." "Safety first," I said firmly. "We'll absorb the costs. Just document everything for the financial impact assessment." My next stop was Seattle headquarters, where Melissa had been coordinating with the IT team to restore access to my historical forecasting data. When I arrived at the forecasting department, soon to be expanded under my new role, she was arguing with a nervous-looking IT specialist. "The data wasn't just archived," she was saying, her frustration evident. "It was deliberately purged from both primary and backup systems. We need to restore from Gavin's personal backups." The IT specialist looked relieved when he saw me. "Mr. Price, we're trying to determine the best integration path for your data. There are some compatibility issues with the current system architecture." "There wouldn't be compatibility issues if someone hadn't ripped out the foundation to make room for a shiny new facade," Melissa muttered, not quite under her breath. I suppressed a smile. "Let's focus on solutions. I've brought complete backups of the forecasting architecture. We'll need to rebuild some integration points, but the core methodology is intact." For the next few hours, we worked on restoring the forecasting system to its previous functionality, with Melissa translating my occasional technical shorthand for the benefit of the IT team. By evening, we had a working prototype that could begin generating accurate forecasts again. Not the full hybrid system I envisioned for the future, but a functional stopgap to prevent further inventory disasters. At 6 p.m., Emily called me to her office for an update. She'd spent the day with the board and major shareholders, explaining the situation and the recovery plan. She looked exhausted, but determined. "How bad is it?" she asked, as I took a seat across from her desk. "The warehouses are worse than the numbers suggested," I admitted. "But we've got a workable recovery plan. Safety issues will be addressed within 3 days. Inventory rebalancing will take longer. Probably 6 to 8 weeks for noticeable improvement. 3 months for full normalization." She nodded, making notes. "And the forecasting system?" "Basic functionality restored today. We're running initial projections overnight. By tomorrow afternoon, we should have reliable guidance for immediate purchasing decisions." "That's remarkably fast," Emily said, looking up from her notes. "I expected weeks, not days." I shrugged slightly. The advantage of building a system from scratch is knowing exactly how it works. Besides, we're not starting from zero. My backups preserved everything essential. Emily leaned back in her chair, studying me with newfound respect. "You know, when Brady proposed replacing your system, he made it sound like we were upgrading from an abacus to a supercomputer. But what you built was never actually outdated, was it?" "It evolved continuously," I explained. The core methodology remained consistent because it worked, but the implementation was updated regularly. We incorporated machine learning elements 3 years ago, predictive analytics even earlier. Brady didn't replace an outdated system. He replaced a proven hybrid approach with an untested, fully automated one. "Why didn't you fight harder when it happened?" she asked, genuine curiosity in her voice. "You must have known your system was superior." I considered the question carefully. Would it have mattered? The decision came from Chicago, with Brady as the designated implementer. The narrative was already set. AI was the future. Human-guided systems were the past. Sometimes, evidence can't compete with a compelling story. Emily winced slightly, acknowledging the truth in my assessment. "Well, the story has certainly changed now. The board is establishing new protocols for technology transitions. No more wholesale replacements without extensive parallel testing." "That's a start," I said. "But the bigger lesson here isn't about technology. It's about institutional knowledge." Sterling lost more than a forecasting system when Brady purged those servers. It lost 15 years of market insights, pattern recognition, and contextual understanding. "Which is precisely why your new role reports directly to me," Emily said firmly. "The CDFO position isn't just about running forecasting. It's about preserving and building upon Sterling's core knowledge base." I nodded, satisfied with her understanding. "In that case, I'd like to implement one additional recovery measure, a knowledge transfer program. Melissa and other key team members should be trained not just on how the forecasting system works, but why it works. No single person, including me, should be the sole repository of critical institutional knowledge." "Approved," Emily said immediately. "Budget whatever resources you need for that initiative. After this fiasco, the board is remarkably open to investing in knowledge preservation." As I left Emily's office that evening, I felt a familiar rhythm returning. The satisfaction of solving complex problems, of seeing patterns where others saw only chaos, of building systems that translated data into actionable insights. Yet something was different now. My perspective had shifted during those months away from Sterling. The forecasting work that had once consumed my entire identity now felt like just one aspect of a more balanced life. The deck I'd built, imperfect but solid, represented something important. There was value in creating things beyond spreadsheets and algorithms. Over the following weeks, Sterling's recovery proceeded largely according to plan. The most dangerous safety violations were resolved within days. Inventory began flowing more smoothly as we implemented targeted promotions to reduce excess stock. The forecasting system, restored and enhanced, once again provided reliable guidance for purchasing decisions. My new role as Chief Data and Forecasting Officer gave me a seat at the executive table, where strategic decisions were made. I used that position not to dominate discussions, but to ensure that data-driven insights informed every major initiative. The lesson of Brady's failure wasn't lost on anyone. Even the most impressive technology couldn't replace contextual understanding and institutional knowledge. Melissa thrived as Director of Forecasting Operations, bringing fresh perspectives while embracing the core methodologies that had proven so reliable. Rico implemented new inventory management protocols in Portland that would prevent future overflow situations. Together, we built a forecasting department that balanced innovation with proven expertise, technology with human insight. 3 months after my return, Sterling's inventory levels had normalized. The financial impact of the crisis, approximately $2.3 million in total losses, had been absorbed, though it would affect bonus structures throughout the company for the year. Most importantly, a valuable lesson had been learned about the dangers of discarding proven systems for untested solutions. On a crisp autumn evening, I left the office at a reasonable hour, something I was making a habit now, and drove home to my deck. As I sat watching the sunset with a cup of coffee, my phone rang. The caller ID showed a Chicago area code I didn't recognize. "Gavin Price," I answered. "Mr. Price, this is Martin Levine, CEO of Pinnacle Distribution." Pinnacle was one of the largest competitors in our industry, based in Chicago. "I hope I'm not disturbing your evening?" "Not at all," I replied, curious about the unexpected call. "I'll get straight to the point," Levine continued. "We recently hired Brady Lorman as our Vice President of Supply Chain Innovation. He implemented an AI forecasting system that promised revolutionary improvements. 3 months in, we're facing serious inventory imbalances across multiple categories." I closed my eyes, unsurprised, but still disappointed. Brady had clearly learned nothing from his failure at Sterling. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said neutrally. "The reason I'm calling," Levine continued, "is that your name came up repeatedly when we began investigating what went wrong. Your forecasting methodology at Sterling is apparently something of a legend in the industry." "I wouldn't go that far," I demurred. "We've simply developed a balanced approach that combines technology with human oversight. Whatever you call it, it works. I'd like to hire you as a consultant to help us resolve our current situation and rebuild our forecasting system properly." The offer was flattering and undoubtedly lucrative. It was also an opportunity to prevent another company from making the same mistake Sterling had made. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Levine," I said carefully. "But I've recently accepted an executive position at Sterling that requires my full attention. However, I can recommend some principles that might help address your immediate issues." I spent the next 20 minutes outlining the core concepts behind effective forecasting, the balance between automation and human oversight, the importance of historical pattern recognition, the need for contextual understanding of market dynamics. Levine listened attentively, taking notes and asking intelligent questions. "Thank you," he said when I'd finished. "This is extremely helpful. And if you ever reconsider your availability for consulting work, please let me know. The offer remains open." After we hung up, I sat in the gathering darkness, contemplating the irony of the situation. Brady had moved on to another company, implementing the same flawed approach that had failed at Sterling, while I was being asked to clean up his mess from afar. But the call had clarified something important for me. My work at Sterling wasn't just about forecasting inventory or predicting market trends. It was about building systems that preserved and enhanced human knowledge rather than replacing it. It was about finding the right balance between innovation and experience, between technology and intuition. 6 months after my return to Sterling, our financial results told the story of a remarkable recovery. Inventory levels were optimal across all warehouses. Order fulfillment rates exceeded industry standards. The forecasting system, now a true hybrid of AI capabilities and human oversight, was performing with unprecedented accuracy. At the quarterly executive meeting, Emily presented the numbers with evident satisfaction. Sterling has not only recovered from last year's inventory crisis, but has emerged stronger and more resilient. Our new forecasting methodology, under Gavin's leadership, is now being studied as a best practice within the industry. Around the table, executives nodded their approval. The crisis that had seemed so devastating had ultimately led to meaningful improvements across the organization. Safety protocols were stronger. Communication between departments was more effective. Decision-making processes were more rigorous. As the meeting concluded, Emily asked me to stay behind. When we were alone, she handed me a small wooden box. "The board wanted you to have this," she said, "a token of appreciation for steering us through difficult waters." I opened the box to find a small, finely crafted ship's compass with an inscription on the base, "For keeping Sterling on course through the storm." "It was Melissa's idea," Emily explained. "She said you once told her that good forecasting is like navigation. It's not about predicting the weather, but about knowing how to read the signs and adjust course accordingly. I smiled, turning the compass in my hand. She has a good memory. She learned from the best, Emily replied. As we all have. She paused, her expression growing more serious. Brady reached out last week, you know. Pinnacle let him go after their forecasting system created a multi-million-dollar inventory crisis. He wanted to know if there might be a place for him at Sterling again. And, I asked, curious to spite myself. Emily shook her head. I told him we'd learned our lesson about valuing proven expertise over unproven technology. Besides, we already have the best forecasting team in the industry. As I drove home that evening, the compass in my pocket, I reflected on the journey of the past year. From being restructured out of Sterling to returning as a C-level executive. From watching my life's work nearly destroyed to seeing it validated and strengthened. From losing my professional identity to finding a more balanced perspective on what truly mattered. At home, I sat on my deck, still imperfect, still solid, and took out the old USB drive that contained the first version of my forecasting model. 15 years of evolution had transformed that primitive system into something sophisticated and powerful. Yet the core principles remained unchanged: respect for historical patterns, awareness of contextual factors, balance between automation and human judgment. Those principles had saved Sterling from a crisis of its own making. They had preserved my professional legacy when someone tried to erase it. And they had taught an important lesson about the true value of knowledge in an age increasingly enamored with artificial intelligence. I placed the USB drive back in my pocket, alongside the compass, two small objects that represented navigation through uncertain waters. The future would bring new challenges, new technologies, new attempts to replace human expertise with algorithmic solutions. But Sterling and I would face those challenges with a hard-won understanding. You can restructure positions, replace systems, and rewrite narratives, but you cannot erase the value of genuine understanding built through years of experience. The warehouses that had once overflowed were now operating at optimal capacity. The forecasting system that had been dismissed as outdated was now recognized as industry-leading. And the director who had been pushed aside was now guiding Sterling toward a future that balanced innovation with institutional knowledge. Some lessons, it seemed, had to be learned the hard way, but once learned, they were not easily forgotten.